Before this BBC podcast kicks off, I'd like to tell you about some others you might enjoy. My name's Will Wilkin, and I commission music podcasts for the BBC. It's a really cool job. Every day we get to tell the incredible stories behind songs, moments and movements. Stories of struggle and success, rises and falls, the funny, the ridiculous. And the BBC's position at the heart of British music means we can tell those stories like no one else. We were, are and always will be right there at the centre of the narrative. So whether you want an insightful take on music right now or a nostalgic deep dive into some of the most famous and infamous moments in music, check out the music podcasts on BBC Sounds.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Phil Goodlad and this is the Scottish Football Podcast, keeping you up to speed with all the news, the views and analysis you need from our beautiful game. It's Wednesday the 4th of September and here's what's on the agenda today.
Here's Conor Barron, fancies the early chance! Stunning! It's a stunning strike from Conor Barron.
Can the U-Boys take their national team chance after a swathe of call-offs? Also,
you've got to thrive under it, you've got to look at it and go, you know, this is the biggest test we can have. We've had a really good year, we've progressed really well. Let's go and test ourselves and see where we're at.
Can Rangers upset Arsenal in their glamour Women's Champions League tie? And
dummy by Wright and Jack will score! First time, side foot, right foot, bottom left.
Why are some Scotland stars still without a club in September?
The Scottish Football Podcast.
Lots to discuss this morning. Great to have you along. I'm also delighted to say that my two favourite people in all of podcasts, the wonderful Rory Loy, former Rangers, Carlisle, Falkirk striker, and Joelle Murray, the former Hibs captain and Scotland international, two players that have played at the game at a higher level than you and I will ever aspire to. Rory, Joelle, good morning.
Morning, Phil.
Seems very strange to say Scotland stars without a club in the first week of September. But that's probably, Rory, where we're at right now. I mean, I know that the season has been up and running for about 4 or 5 weeks now. Is it still a surprise that some of the names that we have out of contract at the moment are still without a club?
Yeah, it's probably becoming a more modern thing at this moment in time. Over the last few years, I would say that players will feel that when the transfer window closes, some clubs who maybe need to fill positions, so if we look in our own country, the likes of Liam Cooper, who's a centre-back, Ryan Jack, who's a central midfielder, once the window shuts in certain places and then it starts to shut across Europe, clubs who maybe haven't managed to get the central midfielder or the central defender in, players and agents have a little bit more leverage in terms of finances, and you might find yourself operating at a slightly higher level as well. So it is a changed landscape, I would say, in terms of business being done so late in the food chain. It really does have its effect when it starts from the top and works its way all the way down. And the likes of these players who are top players are maybe just holding out for something which wasn't attainable within the transfer window, Phil.
And Joel, we'll get into this in just a moment, but from a player's perspective, the fact that the season is underway and they have no income coming in, that at a human level must be quite a worrying time.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're a player who isn't fortunate enough to have the finances to kind of get you through that period of time of unemployment, certainly a very worrying time, Phil, because you go for the majority of your career having that frequent income. So when there is a break in that, I can imagine it is certainly a worry. And then also the physical side of things. If again you're not fortunate to be training with a club, you'll be training on your own, isolated. So it's kind of getting up to speed from a physical perspective as well. Once you do find
one of the topics that we're going to discuss today, just the number of players who are without a club. We'll get to that in just a moment. Firstly, as ever, let's quickly take a swirl through the Scottish football headlines. The Scotland striker Ollie McBurney, a recent signing for Las Palmas, has claimed this is the first summer without contact from Rangers, despite him being available for free after leaving Sheffield United. Meanwhile, fellow international Stuart Armstrong has sealed a move to the MLS, joining Ryan Gold at Vancouver Whitecaps. The SFA technical director Graham Jones is being linked with a move to Tynecastle, this to replace departed sporting director Joe Savage. And Raith Rovers have appointed the former Barnsley boss Neil Collins as their new manager. Let's start up with the Scotland squad the day before the meeting for the men's national side at Hampden with Poland. Here's a list of names for you, Joelle Murray. Adams, Forrest, Taylor, McCrory, all out. With Barron, Doig and McCracken in. Firstly, all those names were out. How significant is it to go into this first match in the Nations League missing 2 or 3 players that you would have thought would have started?
Yes, it's not ideal. I think that kind of initial disruption and unnecessary chat isn't ideal. It seems like we're becoming accustomed with it now, Phil. I don't think, and I can't remember the last time a squad was named and we've went with that squad, whether that's due to call-offs or various other reasons. So yeah, it's not ideal. Obviously, Che Adams is certainly a big focal point within the group. But look, what it does bring is it brings opportunities for Conor Barron, for Josh Doig, for the guys that have been brought in, because for someone's disappointment, it opens a door for an opportunity for other players who have been in form, if we're talking about Conor Barron especially.
Rory Loy, because we have Aaron Hickey missing, we have Kieran Tierney missing, Callum McGregor no longer available as well. This maybe isn't a problem for Steve Clarke. It should maybe be looked more as an opportunity to change things up, because sometimes change is difficult, especially if you're set in your ways, and especially if you think that you have the core group there that can still do a job for you. Steve Clarke may be forced to switch things up.
Yeah, and to be fair to Steve Clarke, he gets a little bit of criticism from some corners at times for not doing that often enough, when really, when you look at the qualification campaigns, he's been a success. It does feel like a kind of good natural time to make changes after the Euros, going into the Nations League. I do understand we've got a very tough Nations League, so you don't want to be bringing in uncapped players all over the shop and exposing them to international football for the first time, but it does feel like quite a natural time for transition, with McGregor retiring and after the Euros and things, to give the likes of Doig and Barron, young players, good players, an opportunity. Obviously, it's disappointing for Greg Taylor, James Forrest, and Che Adams has dropped out as well. But this might just be the catalyst for positive change that we need.
Joelle, let's fuel the old firm conspiracy theories.
Please don't, Phil. Please don't.
To get into. Well, I'm going to speak to Joelle because she doesn't have any skin in the game on this one, Rory. So I'll bench you for just a moment. Conor Barron played really well in a midfield for Aberdeen last season, was spoken about potentially with an outside chance of getting into the Euro squad. Didn't. Moves to Ibrox, plays a handful of games. Guess what? He's called into the Scotland squad. Now, is that a reflection of him as a player or the improvement that he has made since moving to Ibrox, if that's indeed why Steve Clarke has called him up?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, because we all know it's not the first time this scenario's come about. When a player has been playing well for a club, they make a move to the old firm and almost instantly they get that international opportunity. But... So
you believe in the conspiracy theories, Joelle? That's what I want to hear.
No. Yeah, I wouldn't say I believe in it. I think Conor Barron certainly has upped his levels. I think you can see in quite a poor Rangers team, if we're talking about the last few years. It's probably not the strongest Rangers team over the last few years, but he's absolutely been a shining light within that team. You wouldn't believe he's a very young player, inexperienced at that level, if we're talking about European competition. And as I say, he's been a shining light. So I think regardless of where he's playing his football now, he certainly, for me, deserves that international recognition and opportunity.
Also, Phil, can I just say, he wasn't a regular for Aberdeen last year. There's this assumption that he was because he had a strong end to the season. He wasn't. Barry Robson didn't play him very often, especially at the start of the season in the first kind of 4 or 5 months. He then played in fits and starts, and he did play well when he came in, but there was that contract situation. Peter Leven used him a little bit more towards the end of the season. So in terms of looking at Steve Clarke or whoever it may be and saying, well, he's moved and now he's been called up, that's probably the most consistently started games and played for a little while. So, this idea that he was a regular last season and had an unbelievable season, it's not quite accurate.
So has he been called into the Scotland squad based on his his start for Rangers, or is it that there was a player there last season? It's just he's putting in a more polished performance in the Rangers midfield?
Well, first and foremost, he wasn't called into the squad. There's been four call-offs, so that's then opened the door. Had that happened in the Euros and we'd had maybe 4, 5, 6, you never know. He might have been called up, but I don't think that the contractual situation at Aberdeen was good for Conor Barron in terms of the club that he was at himself and things. But this notion that he was playing every week last year, he was great, he was amazing. Now he's moved to Rangers and suddenly he's been called up. It's not quite the case. He didn't play every week at Aberdeen last year. There was a lot of noise around a lot of things with Conor Barron last year. When he came into the team, he did well, especially towards the back end of the season. But just to waylay the conspiracies, if you do look at last season as a whole, yes, if you were to look at his figures, it might show that he's, 40 appearances, but you look at a lot of those, they're off the bench, and he didn't play a lot of football in the first 4 or 5 months.
New podcast, hopefully coming soon. Rory Loy, busting old firm conspiracy theories, hopefully coming to a BBC Sounds near you. Rory, would you have expected with Shea Adams calling off that we would have called up a striker as opposed to calling up a midfielder? I mean, we only have, Tommy Conway, Lyndon Dykes and Lawrence Shankland as out-and-out strikers in the squad for the doubleheader.
Yeah, quite possibly. It's 4 out, 3 in, so there's definitely room there for a forward player. You look at Kevin Nisbet, who's started really well at Aberdeen. He's there to score goals. He did that in the last minute. Has he played enough football? Steve Clarke probably not. An advantage for Kevin Nisbet is he's been there before. He knows the environment. He knows what Steve Clarke expects. So I personally don't think it'll take many goals for Kevin Nisbet, or many good performances for Kevin Nisbet to find his way back into the squad.
Rory, what you want to say is that if Kevin Nisbet had signed for Rangers or Celtic, he'd have been in the squad right now. That's what you want to say.
I just don't think you're enjoying that I've rebuffed your ideas that there's a conspiracy theory going on here, Phil.
Please, answers not on a postcard. I don't subscribe to conspiracy theories involving the old firm, please. But
you look a little bit further afield, you've got Ryan Hardy down the road, who went through a little bit of a purple patch last year, scored a good few goals. He's now operating under Wayne Rooney, but he's not managed to have a start to the season in terms of goals that he would have wanted. So, he'll need to try and pick up a little bit more form to try and get into the squad. But like I said, I expect Kevin Nisbet to be in and around that squad come the Christmas, New Year time.
Joel, one last thing on the Scotland squad. Across one or two of the back pages this morning, Scotland assistant manager John Carver speaking about the Euros being the biggest disappointment of his career. More of a disappointment, he says, than being sacked at his beloved Newcastle. Earlier in the week, we heard John Carver say that not one person over the summer has come up to him to say they were disappointed with Scotland at the Euros. I'm slightly lost in following the line here. So at the start of the week, Carver saying no fans said to him they were disappointed with Scotland and Germany. Now this morning, he's saying that Scotland and Germany was the biggest disappointment of his career.
Yeah, it's a strange one because it almost sounds a lot like contradicting statements. However, I don't know, reading between the lines, I would read that as a personal disappointment. Personal standards haven't been met, individual standards haven't been met, collective standards haven't been met. So although as a nation there's not essentially been that outcry of disappointment, I think from a collective group, certainly the quality within the group, the expectation that was there based on previous results, I think that's potentially where that kind of that kind of recent comment has come from. I'd imagine that's how I would read it, and that's how certainly putting myself in his shoes, I would certainly be feeling.
Moving on, Celtic and Rangers women's teams face big games today in the Champions League qualifying. Celtic take on Koops of Finland. The game might actually be underway, might even be over by the time you hear this. It kicks off at 10 o'clock in Lithuania this morning. Rangers this evening face the rather daunting task of taking on Arsenal in London. Joelle, let's start with Celtic. Always difficult away from home. Koops of Finland. Is this a team that Celtic will believe they can get past and get into the next phase of qualifying?
Yeah, I truly believe they'll have that kind of mindset, that positive mindset going into this morning's game. They believe in the quality and strength that they have in the squad. I know certainly from the interviews post-match on Friday night, after our game, they were extremely disappointed not to take something. They saw that as a kind of warm-up game to this morning's game. And of course, they've had two additional kind of recovery days going into the travel and then into the fixture this morning. So yeah, I truly believe that they should have the strength, depth and quality within the squad to overcome this first European encounter.
If we don't know that much about Koops of Finland, the same cannot be said of Arsenal. Finished third last season in the English top flight in the women's game. Real powerhouse now in women's football. How big a task is this for Rangers to at least get to a point this evening where they believe that they can get into the next round of qualifying, and we'll come to the convoluted qualifying process of the Women's Champions League. But tonight against Arsenal, this is arguably as big a game as Rangers could face at this stage of the season.
Yeah, I would argue it's their biggest game probably in their history. I think the level of opposition, the magnitude of the competition, the fact that it is a kind of in or out situation, and I truly believe that if Rangers become that resolute team, stay in the game as long as possible, then they'll try and go for it in the latter stages. But that'll be no mean feat against a team of Arsenal's quality. They've recruited well over the summer. Caldente from Barcelona will pose a fantastic threat up top alongside the current kind of quality players that they have in their squad. So listening to Joe Potter and Nicola Doherty yesterday, they're aware of the fantastic threat that they pose, but it didn't seem to certainly faze them. They'll go in on the back of a good start this season. I don't think they've conceded a goal so far, so they've got a good defensive and attacking record, but this will certainly be a step up in competition, Phil.
Yeah, you mentioned the Rangers boss, Joe Potter and Nicola Doherty. A really good episode of Behind the Goals podcast with Leanne Crichton and Rachel Corsi. You can listen to that right now at BBC Sounds. Just finally, Joelle, on Rangers in particular, 5 wins from 5 in the league, 43 goals rattled in, none conceded. If you look at those stats, you think, wow, Rangers are really going well. But yet that is in domestic matters. Very, very, very different to take that into a game in London tonight against Arsenal.
Yeah, and I don't think they'll get caught up at all on those performances, Phil, because they'll appreciate the level of opposition will be completely different this evening. I think they've got a team of fantastic professionals. Obviously, Joe Potter's played down in the league. She's an England international, so she may well even know a few of the players within that squad. So I think they're professional enough to park what's been and then look to tonight's game as a completely isolated fixture, a different opponent and a real step up.
Rory, I mentioned the convoluted process now in football. Remember the good old days when a team beat a team and they went through to the next round? It's now Rangers and Celtic. If they win tonight, they go into the first qualifying round final at the weekend, and then they get into the second round. It's like it's mini groups within bigger groups, and I don't know. Sometimes I think UEFA just find ways to make this more difficult. Do they not?
Yeah, listen. There's so many clubs want a piece of the financial gain in Europe, and there's so many players as well, obviously aspiring to play at that level. So they're trying to make room for a lot, as well as revenue from other places. But Rangers have got a tough task tonight, as Joelle says, against Arsenal, and fingers crossed that the two sides can go and get through. Celtic can do the business against Koops as well, because I felt that Kilmarnock gave a half decent account of themselves across their qualifying campaign. St Mirren did okay as well. So if the women's side, Celtic and Rangers, can go and do the same, then Celtic and Rangers can have half decent European campaigns, and the men's side, I think we're in a half decent place in terms of our European standing.
Good news for Rangers, as they've announced they'll return to Ibrox for the League Cup tie with Dundee later this month on the 21st of September. Rory Loy, Rangers board be delighted that this news is released to almost try and take the heat away from post-Old Firm defeat on Sunday. It's only going to be 3 stands that's open at Ibrox. And I saw on social media last night one prominent Rangers fan saying, well, OK, at least playing in 3 stands would be a lot better as playing almost at a 3/4 empty Hampden like we've seen in the past. How difficult do you think it's been for Rangers to play at the National Stadium and not play at home?
Listen, everyone likes to play at their home stadium, and that's not to say Rangers haven't had a string of decent enough results domestically at Hampden.
They've won every game, haven't they?
Well, they've won every game. I mean, yeah. I don't think other than Ross County, I think they limped past St Johnstone, they limped past Motherwell. Don't think there were any great shakes. But I think as the season moves on, and Joelle will tell you as well, when you're at your home stadium, you've got your routine, you go to the stadium, there's things you like to do, you eat the same food, you go to the same places within the stadium, within the changing room, and you've got that kind of affinity with the place as well and the fans. And then you come out on a match day and, one thing I do think, you say they've won every game, Phil, but that European game against Dynamo Kyiv where they weren't great at all.
Yeah, and sorry, you're right. I mean, every domestic game, you're right.
The atmosphere at Ibrox has been proven to help Rangers punch above their weight. So I'm not saying for a second they would have beaten Dynamo Kyiv if they'd played at Ibrox, but I just think the whole feel of the tie would have been somewhat different. And like I said, just being back at the stadium, having your own place within the changing room, small things that people maybe don't realise make a difference to a player, and that's why away fixtures, when everything's so alien to you, can be slightly more challenging than a home fixture.
Finally, it looks like Stuart Armstrong may have got himself a new club. Still a number of high-profile international players, the likes of Liam Cooper, John Fleck, Ryan Jack, without somewhere to call their footballing home. Joelle Murray, why are guys like these and many more still without a club, and we're now into September?
Yeah, it's difficult because the names you've read out, Phil, I think a lot of teams would be desperate to have that quality within. However, there's a lot of variables, I think, as Rory touched upon earlier. Clubs' finances, they'll have their targets, their priority targets, personal terms, whether it be maybe location. So I think there's a lot of variables. Some players might just want to play football and kind of not care about location, salary, anything like that. However, there may be others who might be relying on a certain level of wages. So I think there's a lot of variables in these decisions, but certainly within the names that you've read out there, a lot of quality across that group.
And Rory, maybe we put so much focus, and when I say we, I mean the media, we put so much focus on the transfer window. Get the deals done before the window closes. But actually, there's a free market now available, and maybe clubs are waiting their time, getting the nonsense of the transfer window rush on the end of the day, and then looking and saying, well, there are free players that we can pick up here.
Exactly. So you wait till everyone's shuffled their pack, you see where everyone lands, and then you have a look at the offers that are there. I don't. We spoke about finances earlier, and that income, the level of player you're talking, Phil. I don't have any concerns with where they've been in the past and what they've earned. That they'll be able to go a month or two without income. It's more further down the food chain where players who are desperately looking for clubs. John Fleck and Ryan Jack. I'm sure they'll have had offers. Liam Cooper, I know, was linked heavily with Hull, but it broke down. But it just shows, though. I played for Dundee. When I signed for Dundee, I grew very close to Paul McGinn. We used to travel together, and the first summer I joined, every day was updating me. John's down the park again. He's running. He's not got a club. A couple of offers, things aren't right. He can't get what he's after. Ends up going to Hibs. I think the season had started at that point. Might be wrong on that one, but I'm pretty sure the season had started. Goes to Hibs, and the rest is history, as they say. And he's went on and had an unbelievable career. So I think players just bide their time a little bit more, especially if they've got that comfort net of a little bit of money to sit there and get them through a few months. And the leverage and the power falls back to the player and the agent after the transfer window shuts, because there's not a lot of players available out with free agents.
That's all we've got time for today. My thanks to Rory Loy and Joelle Murray, and thank you for listening. Remember, Hibs Hearts in the SWPL. We're speaking about Scotland tomorrow night. Remember the big Edinburgh derby. It's live on the BBC Sports Scotland website and BBC iPlayer for Friday evening. So pencil that one in for your diaries for then. And of course, we'll be here with you. The Scottish Football Podcast, bright and early every weekday morning. Make sure you don't miss out. Click follow and subscribe wherever you listen. For now, though, I'm Phil Goodlad. Enjoy the beautiful game, and we'll speak again soon.
This is the shocking moment English football has been dreading.
My name is Moses Swabu, and I used to be a professional footballer, but then I got in deep with organised crime and became a match fixer operating in the English League.
A match-fixing investigator has highlighted 2 matches he says appear to have suspicious betting patterns.
How honest are you going to be with me?
This is 100%. Join me for Sports Strangers Crimes presents Confessions of a Match Fixer. Listen on BBC Sounds.